The human soldier stood at the edge of the ravaged landscape, his gaze lost in the horizon. For years, this barren planet had been his home, a place he once never imagined finding himself. The world had no name. It was just a part of the universe, waiting for the next unfortunate soul to stumble upon it. He had stumbled, all right, but survival, it seemed, was the only option. A catastrophic battle, one that had taken place years ago, was what had brought him here. He and his team, a small group of humans, had come to help an alien species in their war against a common enemy. The battle had been brutal, far worse than any of them had prepared for. The humans, unfamiliar with the alien terrain, had fought valiantly, but the end had been inevitable. A final, crushing defeat had taken place, and all who fought with him had been left behind. He was the only one left. The soldier had survived, but just barely. His wounds were deep, and for a long while he had been barely able to crawl, yet, against all odds, he had managed to survive. The stars had no mercy, no gentle hand, and neither did the alien world. This planet was hostile in every sense. The ground, cracked and dry, offered little more than shelter for dangerous creatures, and a handful of hardy plants that looked more like nightmares than food. He had spent years scavenging for food, water, and warmth. He had lived as though each day would be his last. The notion of rescue had faded long ago, replaced by the cold, lonely truth that no one knew he was alive. But then, on that fateful day, when the sun hung low in the sky, painting everything in shades of orange and red, he had heard it, the sound of footsteps, heavy, purposeful, and too precise to be made by any creature he knew. His heart pounded, and his body tensed. He was no fool. He knew he had to hide, or else whatever was coming would surely end his life. He crouched low behind the jagged rocks, his breath shallow. His body still bore the marks of his past, deep scars from the battle and the harsh life he had led since. But none of that mattered now. He had one chance to survive, and he had to take it. The sound grew louder, closer. His mind raced with thoughts of what it could be. An alien predator? A rival faction? The memory of the battle and its bloody outcome haunted him. It was possible that his enemies had sent someone to finish the job. But then, as he peered cautiously over the rocks, something made him freeze. His eyes locked on the sight ahead. A group of figures stood just beyond a distant ridge, their silhouettes casting long shadows in the dying light. At first the soldier couldn't make out much about them, but there was something about the way they moved, the way they carried themselves. He didn't know why, but a strange, undeniable feeling washed over him. He knew them. Then, through the haze of his disbelief, he saw her. Her figure stood apart from the rest, unmistakable even in the fading light. She wore the same distinctive armor that he had seen countless times, designed for the protection of her kind. The alien woman had been one of his comrades during the war. Her name, though once whispered in the quietest corners of his mind, came flooding back to him in an instant. Lyra. Lyra had been his closest ally, and against all odds had been someone he had shared more than just the battlefield with. He had never spoken of it to anyone, but she had been his anchor. She had believed in him when no one else had. But that had been a lifetime ago. He had seen her on the front lines, fighting fiercely, her movements graceful yet deadly. Now, here she was, alive, standing before him. But it was not the sight of her that caused his heart to skip a beat. It was the look on her face. The shock, the disbelief. She looked, terrified, as if she had seen a ghost. His hand reached up to touch his face, realizing that his own condition was far from the soldier he had once been. His hair had grown long, unkempt, and his face was a mixture of dirt, scars, and the passage of time. He had no idea how he must have looked to her, to any other living soul. Lyra's eyes widened as she caught sight of him. For a moment, the world stood still. The other figures with her, 3 in total, turned to look at the same time, but their gazes fell on Lyra first, and then to him. They too were surprised, confused, and uncertain. But Lyra, her breath catching in her throat, took a single, hesitant step forward. Her voice was soft, almost trembling as she spoke. "This can't be. You're alive." The words she spoke echoed in the soldier's mind, as if everything around him had blurred into nothingness. He could barely believe his own ears. Could it be true? Could it be that after all these years, after everything that had happened, after the silence and the loneliness, he was not alone anymore? He stood frozen, not sure how to respond. He had imagined this moment 1,000 times, but never like this. He had never considered that he might meet her again, and certainly not under these circumstances. The entire world around him seemed to fade away as his focus sharpened on her. This was the woman he had once fought beside, the one he had trusted with his life, the one who had taught him more about honor and strength than anyone else ever had. Lyra slowly advanced, her eyes never leaving his. "But I saw you fall!" The explosion, the others, everyone was lost. "There was no sign of you. We thought you—" She trailed off, clearly struggling to put her thoughts into words. The soldier's mind raced. "I wasn't dead," he managed to say, his voice hoarse. "I was left behind! I thought you were all gone too!" Lyra shook her head, her expression softening. "I never stopped looking for you. We all thought you were lost. When I got back, they told me there were no survivors, that you didn't make it." His heart clenched as he listened to her. Her words rang true. She had believed him to be dead, just like everyone else, but here they were now, face to face, after everything that had happened. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, her voice breaking the silence. "I never gave up. I just couldn't believe it." The soldier could see the sincerity in her eyes. There was pain there, pain from the loss of so many, pain from the burden of the war. But there was something else, something new, a glimmer of hope. As the soldier took a step forward, the world seemed to shift around them. The tension of the past, the anger and fear, slowly faded. In its place there was only one undeniable truth. They were both alive. And, for the first time in years, that meant something. Together, they could rebuild, not just the shattered alliance, but their lives. They had both been changed by the war, by the sacrifices, but now, they had the chance to heal. There was still so much to be done, so much to uncover. But for the first time in what felt like forever, the soldier allowed himself a small, hopeful breath. He was no longer alone. And that, in itself, was the first step toward something greater. The soldier and Lyra stood face to face, the silent desert winds swirling around them, carrying with them the weight of everything that had happened. The world felt still for a moment, as if the universe itself was giving them time to process the impossible reunion. The years of silence, the countless battles, the days spent in solitude, everything rushed through his mind in that instant. But standing before him now was Lyra, the woman who had been his closest ally during the war. She was real. She was alive. And she was staring at him as if she couldn't quite believe it, just as he couldn't. For a long time they simply stared at each other. The soldier, unsure of what to say, took a slow, deep breath. His body ached, reminding him of the wounds he had carried for so long. Yet the sight of Lyra, so full of life and determination, gave him a strength he had not felt in years. Lyra was the first to speak, her voice trembling ever so slightly. "I don't understand."
"How did you survive? We all thought you were—"
She trailed off, her words catching in her throat. The soldier shook his head, his gaze never leaving hers. "I don't know," he replied honestly. "I woke up in the wreckage. I was left behind and the others." His voice faltered, the memories of that fateful day flooding his mind. "I didn't know if anyone made it. It's taken years to find a way to survive here, to keep going." Lyra's eyes softened with sympathy, but there was something else in her expression. A flicker of disbelief lingered in her eyes, as if she couldn't comprehend what she was hearing. She stepped closer, her hand reaching out as if unsure whether to touch him, to confirm that he was really here, standing before her.
I thought you were dead. I thought I'd never see you again,
she whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. The soldier didn't know what to say. All the words that had been building inside him seemed to escape him now, leaving him with nothing but the raw reality of the moment. He had no answers for her. There were so many things that had happened, so many unanswered questions. But standing here with her, something deep inside him stirred. The war, the losses, the years spent fighting alone, all of it seemed to fade into the background. For the first time in years, he felt like he wasn't completely lost. Lyra seemed to sense the weight of his silence. She dropped her hand slowly, taking a step back. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice stronger now. But there was a hint of vulnerability there. I never thought I'd see you again. It's been so long." The soldier nodded, his own feelings hard to put into words. He had spent so much time in the wilderness, fighting to survive, that he hadn't allowed himself the luxury of hope. He hadn't believed there was anything left worth fighting for. But now, standing before him, was the person who had once been his closest friend, his ally, someone who had fought alongside him when the odds were insurmountable.
"I never gave up," Lyra said, her gaze unwavering. "I knew you couldn't be gone. You were too strong. She paused, her voice thick with emotion.
I just didn't know where to look anymore." The soldier felt a knot tighten in his chest. He had never expected anyone to search for him, to believe in his survival after everything had fallen apart. He had thought he had been left to die, just another casualty of war. But Lyra had kept fighting, kept hoping. "I didn't think anyone would come looking for me," he admitted, his voice low. Lyra's eyes softened, her hand moving up to rest gently on his arm.
"I should have never stopped believing in you. I was just so lost after everything that happened."
After you, we all thought we'd never see each other again.
She looked down, the emotion in her eyes clear. "But now you're here." The soldier swallowed hard, the words he wanted to say stuck in his throat. There was so much he wanted to explain, to tell her, about the years of survival, the pain of being alone, the memories of the battle that had taken everything from him. But none of that seemed important now. What mattered was that they were together again.
"I'm not the same man I was,"
he said quietly, his voice rough. "I've seen too much. I've been through things I don't think I'll ever fully recover from." Lyra nodded, understanding in her eyes.
"I don't expect you to be the same. None of us are the same after everything that's happened."
But I never stopped believing that we could rebuild, that there was still hope. The soldier turned his head, his gaze scanning the horizon. The alien world stretched out before them, desolate and unforgiving. But now there was a glimmer of something new, something worth fighting for.
"I don't know what happened after we were separated," the soldier continued, "but I can't help but feel like we still have a chance to make things right."
Lyra's eyes locked onto his, a flicker of hope dancing in her gaze. "I never stopped believing that we could win, that we could take back what was lost."
"There's still a fight to be had, and I know you're the one who can help lead it."
The soldier felt a fire stir inside him, a flame that had long been extinguished by the years of isolation and despair. The memories of the war, of the battles fought and lives lost, still haunted him. But with Lyra standing beside him, he could feel the weight of those memories lessen. For the first time in years, he felt like he could do something again, like there was still a chance for redemption. "I can't do it alone," he said, his voice steady. "You don't have to," Lyra replied, her voice filled with determination. "We'll do it together.
I've gathered a group of allies. There are still people out there who believe in what we were fighting for.
We just have to find them. We have to rebuild."
The soldier nodded slowly.
"Then, let's start. Let's find the others. Let's remind the galaxy that we're not done yet." Lyra smiled, a fierce, determined smile. It's time to take back what was stolen from us. Time to show them that humanity is not done. That we are still here, and we're not backing down. And with those words, a plan began to form. One that would send them across the galaxy in search of those who had once fought beside them. But this time, they would not be seeking only allies. They would be seeking justice. And with Lyra by his side, the soldier knew that this was only the beginning. They would rebuild. Together. As the sun set on the alien landscape, casting long shadows over the dust and rubble, the soldier and Lyra stood side by side. The weight of the past was still heavy on their shoulders, but for the first time in years, they could see the future. A future where hope was still alive, where they could still fight for something greater than themselves. And as they walked forward into the unknown, they knew that no matter what came next, they would face it together. This was just the beginning. And they were ready. The days after the reunion felt like a blur to the soldier. The galaxy, once a vast, cold void, now seemed filled with the promise of something more. Something he had long given up on. Lyra, standing beside him once again, gave him a reason to fight. Together, they had gathered a group of allies, survivors from various worlds, humans and aliens alike, who still believed in the cause they had once fought for. They had been scattered, lost in the aftermath of the war, but now they had found each other. The soldiers were no longer the same as they had been before the battle, before the fall. The years of separation had worn them down, but the fire of resistance burned brightly in their hearts. They had endured. They had survived, and now they were ready to take back what had been lost. The first meeting of their new alliance was held in the ruins of an old command center. It had been abandoned for years, a relic from a time when the galaxy had been full of hope. The walls were scarred, the floor cracked and covered in dust, but to the soldiers it was a symbol, a place where they could start again. Lyra stood at the front of the room, addressing the gathered group. Her voice was steady, filled with the strength that had always defined her.
"We've been through hell and back," she said, her eyes sweeping over the faces in the crowd. "But we're still here."
And that's something. The galaxy may think we're gone, but we're not. We're still alive, and we're still fighting. We have a chance to take back what was stolen from us. The soldier stood to the side, watching her with admiration. She had always been a leader, even when they were back on the battlefield. She had a way of making people believe, even when the odds were stacked against them. And now, seeing the way she spoke with such confidence, he knew that the fight ahead of them was far from over. They had a chance, a real chance, to change the course of history. "We need to find the traitors," Lyra continued.
"The ones who betrayed us, the ones who thought they could control everything. We need to expose them for what they are and remind the galaxy that we will not be silenced."
The soldier's mind drifted as Lyra spoke, his thoughts turning to the war. The memories of the battles, the losses, the friends he had watched fall. It was all still fresh in his mind, but he knew now that he wasn't alone in those memories. Lyra was with him, and the others, the ones who had survived. They were with him too. After the meeting, the soldier and Lyra sat in a quiet corner of the base, discussing their next steps. "We have to be careful," the soldier said. "The enemy is still out there, and they're more powerful than ever. We don't know who we can trust." Lyra nodded, her expression serious. "I know. But we don't have a choice. We have to take the fight to them. If we wait any longer, it will be too late." They spent hours planning, discussing their strategy, their goals. They would need to gather more allies, find the ones who had escaped the galaxy's watchful eye. They had a plan, but the road ahead was uncertain. There were many obstacles, many enemies, and the price of failure was high. But there was one thing that they both knew for sure. They couldn't do it alone. As the days passed, the soldier and Lyra traveled from planet to planet, seeking out those who might join their cause. Some were hesitant, still mourning the loss of the war and their people. Others were angry, filled with a desire for revenge. But the soldier and Lyra spoke with them, shared their vision of what the galaxy could be if they stood together. Slowly, the group began to grow. It wasn't long before they had enough people to form a small but formidable army. The soldiers trained, prepared for the battles ahead. They worked together, learning how to fight as a unit once more. The soldiers from the old days, those who had fought beside the soldier and Lyra, became their commanders, leading their forces with skill and determination. But not all was well within the ranks. There were whispers, doubts that began to surface. Some of the soldiers questioned the leadership of Lyra and the soldier. They were new, untested.
They had been gone for so long, and now they were expected to lead a rebellion?
Some of the soldiers feared they might fail, that they might lose everything once again. Lyra, as always, took charge of the situation. She gathered the soldiers together, standing before them with the same confidence that had earned their respect all those years ago.
I know you have doubts, she said, her voice calm but firm. I understand why.
I've felt the same way. But we have to believe in each other. We have to trust that this fight is worth it. If we don't fight for something now, then what's left? Nothing. We'll be lost in the dust. Forgotten. The soldiers listened, some nodding, others still unsure. But the soldier could see it in their eyes. They were starting to believe again. They were starting to see that this wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice, about giving the galaxy a future worth fighting for. We're not doing this for us, the soldier added, his voice steady. We're doing this for everyone who didn't make it, for those who believed in the cause and never got to see the end of the fight. With that, the group rallied around them, stronger than before. The whispers of doubt faded, replaced by the sounds of soldiers training, preparing for the battles ahead. They would fight, not just for themselves, but for a future where they could rebuild, where they could stand together against the forces that had broken them. Days turned into weeks, and soon the group had grown into something more than they had ever imagined. They were a force that could take on the galaxy's greatest threats. The soldiers were ready. Lyra was ready. The soldier was ready. One evening, as they stood together looking out at the stars, the soldier couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. They had come so far. From the ruins of the war to this moment, they had built something new. And it wasn't just the soldiers or the commanders. It was the hope that had been buried under years of fear and doubt. They had brought it back. We're not done yet, Lyra said softly, her voice carrying in the quiet night air. But we will be. We'll finish what we started. We'll take back the galaxy.
The soldier nodded, his gaze fixed on the stars. Together, and together they would fight. They would fight for freedom, for justice, and for the future of a galaxy that had long forgotten what it meant to hope. The journey ahead would be long, and the battles would be fierce. But they were ready. The soldier and Lyra, with their new allies, would show the galaxy that they had not been forgotten. That humanity was alive, and it was not going to back down. The moment of silence before the storm was always the hardest. The final preparations were made, the battle plans set into motion. But as the soldier stood in the heart of the command center, staring at the array of maps and strategies laid out before him, the weight of everything ahead pressed down on him. He could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. Every soldier in their ranks was preparing for what would come next, and the soldier knew this would be their greatest challenge. Lyra stood next to him, her posture just as tense, her eyes focused on the plans. They had done everything they could to gather allies, to build a force that could challenge the enemy. But the enemy was unlike anything they had faced before. They were more powerful, more cunning, and had the galaxy's resources behind them. But Lyra had a fire in her eyes that he had come to rely on. She had always been the one who kept him going when everything seemed impossible. And now, standing beside him, she was the same steady force she had always been. "We're ready," Lyra said, breaking the silence between them. Her voice was steady, but there was an edge of determination in it that he recognized all too well. The soldier nodded, though the uncertainty still lingered in his chest. They were ready, But how would they fare when the time came? He had seen the darkness of war firsthand, and the scars it left on those who fought it. Would they be able to withstand the pressure this time? Would the galaxy finally listen?
"We've come this far," he said, more to himself than to Lyra. "But the real test is coming."
We can't afford to make any mistakes. Lyra turned to face him, her eyes searching his face, as if trying to gauge his thoughts. She understood his hesitation, his fear. It was the same fear that had driven them both in the beginning. The fear of failure, the fear of letting everyone down. But she also understood that they had no choice now but to press forward. "Do you trust them?" she asked quietly, referring to the soldiers who had joined their cause. He thought for a moment.
I do, he said, finally meeting her gaze. I believe in them.
"They've shown more courage than I ever thought possible." Lyra smiled softly, her eyes softening with the weight of their shared history.
Then let's give them a reason to fight. Let's make sure they know what we're fighting for.
The soldier nodded, feeling the weight of her words settle in his chest. They were fighting not just for their own survival, but for the future of the galaxy. A future that was being stolen from them by those who thought they could control everything. Those who used their power for their own gain. This battle wasn't just about winning. It was about reclaiming everything that had been lost. It was about restoring hope to a galaxy that had forgotten what it meant to believe in something greater than itself. As they made their way through the corridors of the command center, the soldiers were preparing for the final assault. There was a sense of urgency in the air now, a quiet resolve that had settled over them. They all knew what was at stake. Some of them had lost everything: families, friends, entire worlds. And now they had come together for a common purpose. They weren't just fighting for revenge. They were fighting for the future of the galaxy, for the chance to rebuild what had been broken. When they reached the war room, the rest of their command team was already there, going over the final details of the mission. The soldier could see the same tension in their faces, the same determination. Each of them knew the risks, but they also knew that they were in this together. They had fought side by side, and they would face whatever came next as one. "We'll hit them hard and fast," Lyra said, her voice commanding the room.
"The element of surprise is on our side. Once we break their defenses, we'll have a chance to push forward. But we need to be swift."
The soldier nodded, his mind already racing through the plan. "I'll take the front lines," he said.
"We can't afford to hold back. We need to break through their forces before they have time to regroup."
Another commander, a veteran of the war who had fought alongside them for years, looked up from his map. "You know they'll have reinforcements," he said.
"We won't be able to hold them for long once they regroup." Lyra's expression hardened. "We don't need to hold them forever. We just need to create enough chaos for the rest of our forces to move in."
The soldier clenched his fists. The plan was risky, but it was the only one they had. There was no time to waste. They couldn't afford to wait for the perfect moment. They had to act now, while they still had the upper hand. The soldiers gathered their weapons and began moving into position, preparing to launch the first strike. The soldier could hear the sound of their boots on the metal floors, the quiet hum of anticipation in the air. He turned to Lyra one last time before heading out, his eyes meeting hers with a silent promise.
"Let's finish this," he said.
Lyra gave him a small nod, her eyes full of trust and determination. Together, the battle began just after dawn, with the first strike hitting their enemies' outer defenses. The soldier led the charge, his heart pounding as he charged forward, flanked by his comrades. They fought with everything they had, using their knowledge of the enemy's tactics to outmaneuver them at every turn. The initial skirmishes were brutal, the air thick with the sounds of weapons firing and soldiers shouting. But the soldier could feel the tide turning. Their forces were strong, and they were pushing back the enemy at every step. Lyra's voice came through his comm link, steady and reassuring.
Keep pushing forward.
"We've got them on the run." The soldier didn't reply. He couldn't afford to waste time. His focus was entirely on the battle before him, on the soldiers fighting by his side. He moved with purpose, cutting through the enemy lines with precision. Every strike, every movement was a reminder of the war they had fought and the lives that had been lost. But there was something else now, a sense of unity, of purpose. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for the future. The enemy forces, despite their strength, were faltering. The element of surprise had given them the upper hand, and their command structure was beginning to crack. The soldier and his team had done what they needed to do. They had created the chaos necessary for their allies to break through and deliver the final blow. As the battle raged on, the soldier found himself face to face with the enemy commander. The man who had once been one of their greatest threats stood in front of him, his weapon raised. The soldier could see the fear in his eyes, the fear of losing control, the fear of being exposed for the fraud he was. "You think you've won?" the enemy commander spat, his voice full of anger. The soldier didn't answer. He didn't need to. Instead, he stepped forward, his weapon raised in a swift, decisive strike. The battle was over. The command center was theirs. With the enemy forces in retreat, the soldier stood amidst the wreckage, his breath coming in heavy gasps. The battle had been won, but there was still much to be done. The galaxy wasn't healed yet, and there would be more struggles ahead. But for the first time in a long time, the soldier felt a glimmer of hope. Lyra stood beside him, her face covered in dirt and blood, but her eyes shining with a fierce light. "We did it!" she said, her voice a mix of exhaustion and triumph. The soldier nodded, his gaze turning to the horizon. "We're not done yet, but this is the first step." And together they walked forward, ready to face whatever came next. The galaxy was not lost, not yet, and as long as they had the strength to fight, they would continue to rebuild, together,